My sister pocket-dialed me while she was with him. I heard everything. Every lie she told about me. Every laugh at my expense. Every sentence where my name was twisted into something ugly, something convenient. I didn't cry. I didn't hang up. I didn't interrupt her. I pressed record. For 47 minutes, I stood alone in my apartment, listening to my own sister explain how she planned to ruin me financially, legally, emotionally, and how easy it was because I was too quiet to fight back. That night, she came home smiling, acting like nothing had happened. I smiled too. The judge smiled when he heard the recording. She stopped smiling after the settlement. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about patience, evidence, and the moment I realized that silence, when used correctly, can be far more dangerous than anger. That afternoon didn't feel important. That's the part that still bothers me the most. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't even a bad day. I was in my apartment, standing in the kitchen with the window cracked open because the air felt heavy. A pot of coffee had been reheated twice already, and the sound of traffic below blended into the background like white noise. Bills were spread across the counter: electric, rent, insurance, all mine, as usual. Emily's room down the hall was empty. She'd said she was out with friends. She always said that. My phone buzzed against the countertop. Emily. I stared at her name longer than I should have. My sister never called unless she needed something. Money. A favor. Help smoothing things over with our parents. She preferred texting short, strategic messages she could delete later. I almost let it ring. Something made me answer. Hey, I said, pressing the phone to my ear. No response. At first I thought the call had failed. Then I heard movement, fabric brushing the microphone, the faint clink of silverware, voices layered over low music. A restaurant. Her phone was in her pocket. Emily? I said again. That's when I heard her laugh. Not the careful laugh she used around Mom. Not the small, apologetic one she used when she'd messed up. This laugh was relaxed, confident, unfiltered. A man laughed with her. So, he said, amused, she still has no idea? Emily scoffed. Of course she doesn't. Amelia never notices things like that. My grip tightened around the phone. She still thinks you're struggling? He asked. Yes, Emily replied easily. She thinks I'm barely holding things together. That I need her help. It's kind of sad, actually. The word sad landed harder than I expected. For years, I'd told myself I was helping her because she was younger, because life had been harder on her, because that's what older sisters did. I covered shortfalls. I made excuses. I absorbed the stress so she wouldn't have to. And now she was laughing about it. She's so predictable, Emily continued. Always stepping in, always trying to fix things. She really believes she's protecting me. The man laughed again. And you're just letting her. Why wouldn't I? Emily said. It works. My chest felt tight, like the air had thickened around my lungs. I leaned back against the counter, suddenly aware of how quiet my apartment was. No music, no TV. Just my sister's voice, stripping me down word by word. She thinks I'd never hurt her, Emily went on. That family means something to me. She paused, then added casually. Once this is done, I won't need her anymore. I swallowed. What do you mean, once this is done? The man asked. Emily laughed again. You'll see. I've been documenting everything. Playing it smart. When the time's right, I walk away with my freedom and a nice little settlement. My hands started to shake. Does she know? He asked. Know what? Emily said. That I've been planning this for months? That I've been setting things up? Please. Amelia trusts me completely. She said my name like it was an insult. I stood there, listening to my sister talk about me like I wasn't her blood, like I was an obstacle, a resource, something to be used until it wasn't needed anymore. Every instinct screamed at me to interrupt, to shout her name, to demand an explanation. I did none of those things. Instead, I lowered the phone slightly, tapped the screen and pressed record. The small red dot appeared. I lifted the phone back to my ear, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it through the line. For the next 47 minutes, I listened. I listened as my sister laughed about me. I listened as she rewrote our history. I listened as she planned my future without me in it. And with every word, one truth became painfully clear. I wasn't supposed to hear any of this. But now that I had, I wasn't going to forget a single second. Once I pressed record, time stopped moving the way it used to. I stayed exactly where I was, my back against the kitchen counter, my eyes fixed on nothing. The clock on the microwave ticked forward, but it felt disconnected from the world I was suddenly trapped in. 47 minutes. That was how long my sister talked. 47 minutes of learning who she really was. Emily didn't lower her voice. She didn't hesitate. She spoke freely, confidently, like someone who had rehearsed these thoughts many times before. "She's always needed to feel important," Emily said at one point. "That's why she helps me. It makes her feel superior." The man Ethan laughed softly. "So you just let her think she's the hero?" "Exactly," Emily replied. "She loves that role." My stomach twisted. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up with her when she couldn't sleep. The calls I'd answered at 2 in the morning. The rent checks I'd written without telling anyone. None of that fit the version of me she was describing. But Emily kept going. "She pretends she's selfless," she said. "But everything she does comes with strings. She just doesn't realize it." I pressed my palm against my mouth to keep myself from making a sound. Ethan asked, "What about your parents?" "They believe whatever I tell them," Emily said easily. "I've been planting seeds for months. Little comments, concerns, making Amelia look controlling, overbearing." I closed my eyes. "She's not going to see it coming," Emily continued. "That's the best part. She never pushes back, never makes a scene, never makes a scene." That was how my restraint had been translated in her mind, not as maturity, not as care, but as weakness. At some point, my legs started to ache from standing. I slid down into a chair, still listening, still recording, my hands trembling in my lap. Emily talked about money, about documents, about timing. "She's careful," she said, "but not careful enough. And once I'm done, I won't have to play the grateful little sister anymore." Ethan said something I didn't quite catch, and Emily laughed again, bright, unbothered. "I know it sounds harsh," she added, "but family doesn't mean you let yourself get stuck. Amelia made her choices. I'm making mine." I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not all at once, but in a slow, silent way that was almost worse. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't a moment of anger she'd regret later. This was strategy. By the time the call finally disconnected, the red recording dot still blinking on my screen, my apartment felt unfamiliar, like I'd stepped into someone else's life without permission. I didn't move for a long time. I stared at the phone in my hand, at the timestamp showing 47 minutes and some change, and tried to reconcile that number with the years I'd spent believing my sister loved me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to confront her the second she walked through the door. I wanted her to see my face when I told her I knew. But another thought followed, quieter and steadier. If I confronted her now, she would deny it. If I showed my hand, she would adjust her plan. If I exploded, I would give her exactly what she expected, proof that I was emotional, unstable, overreacting. It's over. I thought of all the things she'd just said about me. She never pushes back. She never fights. I realized something then. I didn't have to fight her the way she imagined. That evening, Emily came home around 7. She breezed in like nothing had happened, tossing her keys into the bowl by the door, smiling like she always did. "Hey," she said, "I'm starving. Wanna order in?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing explode inside me. No shouting, no tears, just a cold, unfamiliar calm. "Sure," I said. "Whatever you want." She smiled, relieved, unaware that anything had shifted. We sat across from each other at the table, eating, talking about nothing. She complained about her day. She laughed at her phone. She lived inside the lie she'd built so comfortably, and I let her. Because while she thought she was winning, I was already planning my next move. And this time, I wasn't going to be quiet out of habit. I was going to be quiet on purpose. I didn't sleep that night. Emily went to bed early, humming to herself as she closed her door, like someone who had nothing to hide and nothing to fear. I stayed on the couch, the lights off, my phone resting on my chest as if it weighed more than it actually did. 47 minutes. I replayed fragments of the recording through my headphones, stopping myself every few seconds before it became too much. Hearing it once had been an accident. Hearing it again was a choice. I needed to know exactly what I had. By morning, I understood something clearly. This wasn't a family argument waiting to be resolved. This was a legal problem waiting to explode. At 9 o'clock, after Emily left the apartment with a distracted wave and a cheerful, "See you later, sis," I searched for a family law attorney. I didn't look for the most aggressive one. I looked for the most experienced. That's how I found Rachel Coleman. Her office was on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown. Clean, quiet, professional. No inspirational quotes on the walls. No soft music trying to calm you down. Just order. She shook my hand firmly. "Amelia," she said, looking me directly in the eye, "why don't you tell me what's going on?" I didn't start with my feelings. I started with facts. "My sister accidentally called me," I said. "She didn't know I was listening. I recorded the entire conversation." Rachel nodded once. "How long?" 47 minutes. That made her pause. I played the recording. We sat there in silence as Emily's voice filled the room, confident, mocking, strategic. Rachel didn't interrupt. She didn't react outwardly. She listened like someone assembling a puzzle. When it ended, she leaned back slightly. "Amelia," she said carefully, "this is not just betrayal. This is intent." The word landed heavily. "Intent to what?" I asked. "To misrepresent," Rachel said. "To manipulate finances. To create a narrative that benefits her legally." She folded her hands. "Do you know what most people walk into this office with?" I shook my head. "Suspicions," she said. "Gut feelings. Incomplete text messages. Credit card charges that might mean something or might not. You walked in with a full confession. Fez." My throat tightened. Rachel continued. "You didn't just catch her saying hurtful things. You caught her planning. That matters." For the first time since the call, something inside me steadied. Rachel explained the basics slowly, clearly. Jurisdiction, consent laws, evidence, the difference between emotion and admissibility. "You didn't record her illegally," she said. "She called you. This is a one-party consent state. The recording is valid." I exhaled, a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "What do I do now?" I asked. Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she asked, "Has she confronted you yet?" "No." "Good," Rachel said. "Then don't confront her." The word "don't" surprised me. "If you confront her," Rachel continued, "she'll deny it. Or worse, she'll adjust. People like your sister don't stop when exposed. They pivot." I thought about Emily's confidence. The way she spoke like the future was already decided. "What if I want answers?" I asked quietly. Rachel met my eyes. "You already have them. What you want now is protection." That word protection felt different than revenge. Cleaner, stronger. Rachel outlined the next steps. Documentation. Financial records. Timelines. "From this point forward," she said, "assume everything is strategic. Every word, every message, every reaction." I nodded. "You don't need to change your behavior dramatically," she added. "In fact, don't. Let her believe nothing has changed." I almost laughed. "That won't be hard. She already thinks I don't see anything." Rachel smiled faintly. "Then let her keep thinking that. It's not for raid." When I left the office, the city looked the same, but I didn't feel the same walking through it. I wasn't panicked anymore. I wasn't confused. I was focused. That night, Emily talked excitedly about her plans for the weekend. A trip, a dinner, new possibilities. She watched my face carefully, searching for cracks. I gave her none. "That sounds fun," I said. "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself." She relaxed immediately. And in that moment, I understood the power shift had already happened. She thought silence meant ignorance. She thought patience meant submission. She had no idea that while she was planning her future, I was already protecting mine. And this time, I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for myself. Rachel was very clear about one thing. "Feelings don't win cases," she told me during our second meeting. "Patterns do." So, that's what I started looking for. Patterns. I didn't storm into Emily's room. I didn't demand explanations. I didn't even ask questions. Instead, I became observant in a way I never had before. At night, while Emily slept, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, surrounded by folders I hadn't touched in years. Old bank statements, shared accounts, emails I'd archived and forgotten. I wasn't searching for a single, dramatic smoking gun. I was tracing behavior. Rachel had warned me that people who believe they're smarter than everyone else tend to get careless. Not immediately, but gradually, especially when they think the outcome is guaranteed. Emily thought she was winning. The first pattern showed up faster than I expected. Small transfers. Nothing outrageous. Nothing that would trigger alarms. $300 here. $500 there. Always just below the amount that would feel suspicious on its own. At first, I tried to explain it away the way I always had. Groceries. Bills. Emergencies. Emily had always been between things. That was her favorite phrase. But when I lined up the dates, something shifted. The transfers didn't match crises. They matched weekends, trips, dinners, hotel stays. I pulled credit card statements next. The ones tied to the joint account Emily still had access to. I remembered insisting on keeping it open, just in case. That kindness stared back at me in numbers. Charges from restaurants I'd never been to. Hotels in neighborhoods she claimed she avoided. Expenses that didn't align with the life she described to me. I highlighted everything. By the third night, my hands were steady as I worked. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by something colder and more efficient. This wasn't betrayal anymore. This was evidence. A week later, Emily started slipping. It wasn't dramatic. It never is. She told me she was going to dinner with a friend named Laura, someone she hadn't mentioned in years. She left dressed carefully, checking her reflection twice in the hallway mirror. When she came back, she talked too much, over-explaining the food, the conversation, the drive. I nodded. Sounds nice. The next afternoon, I ran into Laura by accident at the grocery store. Oh, Laura said, surprised to see me. How's Emily? She's good, I replied lightly. Said you two had dinner the other night. Laura frowned. Dinner? My heart didn't race. I'd already learned not to react too quickly. Oh, I said casually. Maybe I mixed it up. Laura shrugged. I haven't seen her in months. We keep meaning to catch up. That was it. No confrontation. No accusation. Just confirmation. That night I wrote everything down. Dates. Names. Statements. Emily didn't know it yet, but she was building my case for me. Rachel reviewed my notes a few days later. This is good, she said, flipping through the pages. Very good. She paused at one section. You see this? The consistency. The gradual escalation. What does it mean? I asked. It means intent, Rachel said. Again. I smiled faintly. I was starting to recognize the word. Do I say anything? I asked. No, Rachel replied immediately. Not yet. Won't it look strange if I stay silent? Rachel leaned forward. Amelia, silence isn't suspicious when it's consistent with your history. That's your advantage. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my frustration to keep the peace. All the times I'd told myself that family was worth discomfort. Emily had mistaken that for permission. Back at home, she grew more relaxed by the day. She started leaving her phone face up on the table. She stopped checking her messages so carefully. She talked openly about her plans, future plans, vague but confident. I'm thinking about a fresh start, she said one evening, scrolling through her phone. Something new. That sounds exciting, I said, and meant something very different by it. One night, she looked at me curiously. You've been really calm lately. I shrugged. I'm tired of worrying all the time. She smiled, satisfied. That's good for you. What she didn't see was the folder saved on my desktop. What she didn't know was that every calm response was being matched with documentation, that every lie she told casually was being cross-referenced with facts. Rachel called it letting the record speak. I called it survival. By the end of the month, we had enough to move forward. Rachel filed the initial paperwork quietly. No drama, no warning. When Emily was served, she called me immediately. What is this? She demanded. Why would you do this without talking to me? I kept my voice level. I think we're past talking. There was a long pause on the line. Then she said, softer this time. You're making a mistake. I almost laughed. But instead, I said, we'll let the process decide. And for the first time since that pocket-dialed call, I heard something new in my sister's silence. Uncertainty. Emily didn't come home that night. After the papers were served, the apartment felt unusually quiet, too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. I sat at the kitchen table long after the sun went down, the same place where I'd first heard her laugh about me weeks earlier. My phone buzzed again and again. Missed calls, voicemails, messages that shifted in tone with each one. At first, it was anger. How could you do this to me? You didn't even talk to me first. Then, confusion. I don't understand what's happening. We're sisters. And finally, fear thinly disguised as reason. Let's calm down and discuss this like adults. I didn't respond. Rachel had warned me this would happen. When people lose control of the narrative, she said, they scramble to rewrite it. The next morning, Emily showed up unannounced at Rachel's office. I wasn't there, but Rachel told me everything later. She was emotional, Rachel said, her voice neutral. Not hysterical, strategic emotional, crying at the right moments, pausing to see if it worked. Did it? I asked. Rachel smiled slightly. No. Emily had insisted there was a misunderstanding, that she'd been joking, that the recording was taken out of context. She claimed you were trying to punish her, Rachel said, that you'd always been controlling. I let out a slow breath. Of course she did. Rachel's tone sharpened. That's fine. We're past narratives now. We're entering discovery. Discovery. The word sounded clinical, almost harmless, but I quickly learned it was where illusions went to die. Rachel filed formal requests for financial disclosure that same week. Bank accounts, credit cards, cash transfers, any asset Emily had touched during the past 3 years. Emily's attorney, young, nervous, clearly unprepared, pushed back immediately. They claimed the requests were excessive, intrusive, unnecessary. Rachel responded with facts, patterns, timelines, the recording. The judge wasn't impressed with the objections. During the first hearing, Emily sat across the room from me, her posture stiff, her eyes darting around like she was searching for an exit that didn't exist. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just exposed. The judge spoke calmly. In cases involving allegations of financial manipulation, he said, thorough discovery is not optional. It is required. Objection. Overruled. I didn't look at Emily when the ruling came down. I didn't need to. Discovery moved fast after that. Emily's accounts told a story she hadn't planned on telling, transfers she couldn't explain, expenses that didn't align with her claims, contradictions between her statements and the paper trail. Her attorney requested extensions, then more extensions. Rachel denied them. She's running out of room, Rachel told me over the phone one evening. And she knows it. At home, Emily's behavior changed. She paced more, checked her phone constantly, started snapping over small things. You think you're better than me now? She snapped one night when I reminded her to clean up after herself. I met her gaze calmly. No, I think I'm done pretending. Her eyes flashed. You always act like you're so calm, she said. Like you're above everything. I said nothing. She stormed into her room and slammed the door. That silence, the one she used to rely on, no longer worked the way she expected it to. A week later, Rachel called me into her office. We have enough to schedule her deposition, she said. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means, Rachel replied, she'll have to answer questions under oath. No editing, no backtracking. I nodded slowly. The night before the deposition, Emily knocked on my door. Her voice sounded different, lower, controlled. Amelia, she said softly, can we talk? I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She took a breath. This has gone too far. I studied her face. For the first time, I noticed the cracks she'd worked so hard to hide. It went too far when you planned to destroy me, I said evenly. Her mouth opened, then closed. I never meant. Stop, I said quietly. This isn't about what you meant, it's about what you did. She searched my face, looking for the sister who would soften, who would compromise, who would fix things. She didn't find her. The deposition was brutal. Rachel told me later that Emily unraveled slowly, then all at once. She tried to minimize, then deflect, then deny, but the recording didn't change. Her words spoken freely, confidently were played back in that sterile room. Each laugh, each plan, each lie. When asked if the voice was hers, Emily hesitated. Yes, she finally said. That single word carried more weight than any argument she'd made before. When Rachel asked about the transfers, Emily couldn't explain them. When asked about her intent, she contradicted herself. By the end, her attorney requested a break. Rachel refused. "This is proceeding appropriately," she said. When it was over, Rachel called me. "She knows now," she said, "that this isn't about family drama anymore. This is about consequences." That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the same quiet wrapping around me, but this time, it felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain, steady. Emily had spent months believing I would never push back. She was wrong. And for the first time since that accidental phone call, I allowed myself to think the unthinkable. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to walk away free. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No dramatic chandeliers, no echoing footsteps, just wooden benches, neutral walls, and a silence that felt heavier than anything I'd carried so far. The kind of silence where every breath mattered. Emily sat at the opposite table. She wore a light-colored blouse, conservative, carefully chosen. Her hair was pulled back tightly, as if control could be restored by appearance alone. She didn't look at me when I walked in. She didn't have to. I already knew she was afraid. Rachel leaned in slightly. "Remember," she whispered, "this isn't personal anymore. Let the record speak." The judge entered promptly, a man in his early 60s with a face that suggested he'd seen every variation of this story before, and none of them impressed him. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file. "I've reviewed the submissions," he said calmly. "The financial records, the deposition transcripts, and the audio recording entered into evidence." Emily's attorney shifted in his seat. The judge continued, "This matter concerns allegations of intentional financial manipulation and misrepresentation between family members." He looked up, directly at Emily. "Miss Carter," he said, "before I render my decision, I want to be very clear about what this court considers relevant." Emily nodded stiffly. "This court is not here to adjudicate hurt feelings," the judge said. "We are here to determine credibility, intent, and fairness." He paused. "And the evidence in this case is unusually clear." My hands were clasped tightly in my lap. I forced myself to breathe evenly. The judge gestured slightly. "Counsel, you may proceed." Rachel stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize anything. She simply walked the court through the timeline methodically, calmly, like someone laying pieces on a board where the outcome was already decided. She referenced the transfers, the contradictions, the documented statements. Then she played the recording. Emily's voice filled the room, confident, mocking, certain of her own superiority. I watched Emily as the sound played. Her shoulders stiffened first. Then her jaw tightened. Her hands curled into fists she quickly forced open again. The judge listened without interruption. When the recording ended, the silence that followed felt absolute. Rachel spoke again. "Your Honor, this recording demonstrates not only acknowledgement of the financial conduct in question, but premeditation." Miss Carter did not act impulsively. She planned. Emily's attorney stood abruptly. "Objection," he said. "The recording reflects private conversation and—" The judge raised a hand. "I've already ruled on admissibility," he said flatly. "This objection is overruled." Emily's attorney sat down slowly. The judge turned his attention back to Emily. "Miss Carter," he said, "is that your voice on the recording?" Emily hesitated. The room seemed to hold its breath with her. "Yes," she said finally. Her voice barely carried. "And the statements made regarding financial planning and legal outcomes, were those your statements?" "Yes." "Were you aware," the judge continued, "that your sister was financially supporting you at the time?" Emily swallowed. "Yes." "And did you represent to others that she was doing so under false pretenses?" Emily's eyes flicked toward me for the first time. "Yes," she whispered. The judge nodded once, slowly. "That's sufficient." He leaned back in his chair, hands folded, and spoke in a tone that was neither angry nor sympathetic. "This court finds that Miss Carter engaged in sustained, intentional conduct designed to mislead, financially disadvantage, and manipulate a family member for personal gain." Emily's face went pale. "This is not a matter of poor judgment," the judge continued. "It is a matter of calculated deception." Emily's attorney attempted to stand again. The judge didn't look at him. "I am not finished, counselor." He turned back to Emily. You attempted to use familial trust as leverage. You mistook patience for weakness and silence for consent. My throat tightened. The law does not reward that, the judge said. He glanced down at his notes. The funds in question will be returned in full. Claims of entitlement are denied. Any future legal actions stemming from this conduct are barred. He paused. And let me be clear. This ruling is not punitive. It is corrective. Emily stared straight ahead, unmoving. This court strongly advises all parties to seek boundaries that do not require judicial intervention in the future. Raged at. With that, he gathered his papers. This matter is concluded. The gavel struck once. That sound, soft, final, felt like something breaking open inside my chest. Rachel squeezed my hand gently. It's over, she whispered. Emily remained seated long after the judge left. Her attorney leaned toward her, speaking urgently, but she didn't respond. It was as if the version of herself she'd relied on, the confident, untouchable one, had vanished completely. When she finally stood, she didn't look at me. Not once. Outside the courtroom, the air felt different. Lighter, sharper, real. I stepped into the hallway and stopped. For weeks, I'd imagined this moment, what I'd say. How I'd feel. I realized something then. I didn't need to say anything at all. The truth had already spoken. And for the first time since that accidental call, I wasn't holding my breath anymore. The courthouse emptied quickly. People had their own lives to return to, their own stories unfolding somewhere else. For me, the world felt strangely quiet, as if everything had slowed just enough for me to finally catch my breath. Emily didn't follow me outside. I didn't look back. For the first few days after the ruling, nothing dramatic happened. No confrontation, no apology, just absence. Emily stopped coming home entirely. Her room remained untouched. Her door closed, like a chapter someone was pretending hadn't been written. Rachel called to check in. Legally, everything is settled, she said. If she contacts you, document it, but you're under no obligation to respond. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I slept for nearly 12 hours straight. When I woke up, something felt different, not lighter exactly, but steadier, like a foundation had been reinforced under my feet without me noticing. Emily reached out 3 days later. She didn't call. She texted, "We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone and setting it face down on the table. An hour later, another message appeared. I never meant for things to go this far. That one almost worked. Not because I believed it, but because it echoed a version of my sister I remembered. The one who cried when she messed up. The one who used regret like a bridge back to safety. I didn't cross it. Rachel had told me something during our last meeting that stayed with me. Closure, she said, is something people ask for when they want control without accountability. Emily kept trying. Emails followed. Long ones. Carefully written, she apologized without naming what she'd done. She blamed stress, fear, misunderstandings. She wrote about family, about how we'd lost our way. She never once mentioned the recording. I archived every message without replying. A week later, she showed up at the apartment. I wasn't expecting her. I'd just finished reorganizing the living room, moving furniture, opening space. It felt symbolic in a way I hadn't planned. When I opened the door, Emily stood there with red-rimmed eyes and a carefully neutral expression. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't step aside. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said calmly. She nodded slowly, like she was bracing herself. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I waited. For everything," she added. Still, I waited. Her eyes flicked around the hallway, like she was searching for familiarity to anchor her. "You know I was in a bad place. I didn't think you'd take it this far." I felt a strange mix of sadness and clarity. "I didn't take it anywhere," I said. I responded. "That recording," she started. I held up a hand. "You don't get to minimize that." She flinched. "I loved you," I said quietly. "I protected you. And you used that." Tears welled in her eyes. I said I was sorry. "Yes," I replied, "but you're not taking responsibility, and that's the difference." She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. "You're different," she said. "I am," I agreed. "Because I don't need to be the version of myself that made this possible anymore." She stood there for a long moment, then nodded once and stepped back. "I hope one day you'll forgive me," she said. I didn't answer. When the door closed, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt resolved. Emily moved out of state shortly after that. I heard it through our parents, who called cautiously, unsure of what they were allowed to say. She needs a fresh start, my mother said. So did I replied gently. They didn't argue. Life began to reorganize itself around the absence. I adjusted my budget, closed shared accounts, changed passwords, reclaimed quiet mornings that didn't start with anxiety. I started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd mistaken responsibility for obligation for so long. My therapist asked me once, "What did silence give you?" I thought about it. "It kept the peace," I said. "And what did it cost you?" The answer came easily. Everything. Weeks turned into months. I took a short trip by myself. Nothing glamorous. Just space. Time. A chance to hear my own thoughts without interruption. I found myself smiling at small things again. Music, coffee, the feeling of locking my door at night knowing no one inside was secretly working against me. One afternoon, I ran into Rachel by chance near her office. She waved and smiled. "You look well," she said. "I am," I replied, surprised to realize it was true. She nodded. "That's what happens when people stop gaslighting themselves." I laughed softly. By the time fall arrived, Emily felt like a distant echo rather than a threat. Her voice no longer lived rent-free in my head. Her words no longer defined my boundaries. I had done something I never thought I could. I had chosen myself without rage, without revenge, without becoming someone I didn't recognize. And for the first time in my life, silence wasn't something that trapped me. It was something I chose. A year passed faster than I expected. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because it finally became honest. Without Emily in my daily orbit, there was space, real space, to notice how much energy I'd spent managing someone else's chaos. Mornings felt quieter. Decisions felt lighter. I no longer rehearsed conversations in my head before they happened. I redecorated the apartment slowly, intentionally. Nothing dramatic, just changes that reflected who I was becoming instead of who I'd been trying to be for someone else. I replaced the dining table where I'd once sat listening to 47 minutes of betrayal. I moved my desk closer to the window. Light matters more than we realize. I stayed in therapy. Not to relive the story, but to understand it. One afternoon, my therapist asked, "If you could say one thing to the version of yourself before the call, what would it be?" I didn't answer right away. "I'd tell her that being kind doesn't require self-erasure," I said finally. "And love doesn't ask you to disappear." That realization didn't come with anger. It came with relief. Emily reached out once more, months later, through an email I almost didn't open. She wrote about growth, about perspective, about how losing me had forced her to reflect. I read it carefully. Then I closed it, not because I hated her, not because I wanted punishment, but because I didn't need to reopen a door just to prove I'd learned how to close it. My parents adjusted in their own way. Conversations became more careful, more balanced. No one asked me to be the bigger person anymore. They'd seen what being small had cost me, and I stopped explaining myself. That was new. I invested time where it returned something meaningful, work I enjoyed, friendships that didn't require translation, evenings that ended without emotional exhaustion. I learned how to pause before saying yes, how to sit with discomfort without rushing to fix it. I learned that boundaries don't make you cold. They make you safe. One evening, while walking home from a long day, I passed a cafe where laughter spilled out onto the sidewalk. For a moment, I remembered Emily's laugh, the one that used to make my chest tighten. This time, it didn't. It was just a sound, no power attached. That's when I knew I was free. Not because I'd won in court, not because the truth had come out, but because the story no longer controlled me. People sometimes ask if I regret recording that call. I don't. I regret needing it, but I don't regret protecting myself. Because silence, when forced on you, is oppression. Silence, when chosen, is strength. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. You don't owe access to people who misuse your trust. You don't owe explanations to those who rewrite your intentions. And you don't owe loyalty at the expense of your own safety. Family doesn't get a free pass to harm you. Love doesn't require self-sacrifice without consent. And peace doesn't come from fixing others, it comes from choosing yourself. I didn't lose a sister. I found myself. And that finally was worth everything.